Toshishun Ryunosuke Akutagawa, Chapter 1. Golden Sunset. It was a spring evening. Beneath the western gate of Luoyang, the capital of Tang, a young man stood gazing vaguely at the sky. The young man, named Toshishun, was once the son of a wealthy family, but he had squandered all his fortune and was now in such a pitiful state that he struggled to make ends meet. At that time, Luoyang was a bustling capital, unrivaled in the world, so people and carriages still ceaselessly passed through its streets, the scene of gauze hats worn by old men, golden earrings of Turkish women, and colorful reins adorning white horses, constantly flowing in the oily evening sun that filled the gate, was as beautiful as a painting. However, Toshishun, as before, leaned against the gate's wall, idly gazing at the sky. A slender moon, faintly white like a fingernail mark, was already floating in the hazy sky, gently swaying. The sun is setting, my stomach is empty, and there seems to be nowhere to stay tonight. If living like this means such suffering, perhaps it would be better to throw myself into a river and die. Toshishun had been pondering such aimless thoughts to himself for some time. Then, an old man with one blind eye who had appeared from who knows where suddenly stopped in front of him. As he cast a large shadow onto the gate, bathed in the evening sun, he stared intently at Toshishun's face and said, imperiously, "What are you thinking about?" "I have nowhere to sleep tonight, so I'm wondering what to do." The old man's question was so abrupt that Toshishun, as expected, lowered his eyes and inadvertently gave an honest answer. "Is that so? That's a pity." The old man seemed to be thinking for a while, but then, pointing to the evening sun shining on the street, he said, "Then I'll tell you a good thing. Stand in this evening sun now, and when your shadow falls on the ground, dig at the spot where your head falls in the middle of the night. You'll surely find a cart full of gold buried there." "Really?" Toshishun, surprised, raised his lowered eyes, but what was even stranger was that the old man had vanished. There was no sign of him anywhere. Instead, the color of the moon in the sky was even whiter than before, and 2 or 3 early bats fluttered above the ceaseless flow of people on the street. Chapter 2. The Hollow Banquet. Within a day, Toshishun became the wealthiest man in Luoyang. Just as the old man had said, he stood in the evening sun, watched his shadow, and when he secretly dug at the spot where his head fell in the middle of the night, a mountain of gold, more than a large cart could hold, emerged. Having become immensely wealthy, Toshishun immediately bought a magnificent house and began to live a life of luxury, rivaling even Emperor Xuanzang. He had wine from Lanling bought, longan fruit from Guizhou imported, peonies that changed color 4 times a day planted in his garden, numerous white peacocks set free, jade collected, brocades sewn, fragrant wood carriages built, and ivory chairs custom made. To describe each luxury would make this story endless. Then, hearing these rumors, friends who had previously not even greeted him when they met on the road began to visit him morning and evening. Their numbers increased daily, and within about half a year, among the many talented scholars and beautiful women known in Luoyang, there was not a single person who did not visit Toshishun's house. Toshishun held banquets every day with these guests, The splendor of these banquets was truly indescribable. To give a brief example, while Toshishun was engrossed in watching an Indian magician swallow a sword, sipping Western wine from a golden cup, 20 women surrounded him, 10 with jade lotus flowers and 10 with agate peonies adorning their hair, all playing flutes and kotos with delightful melodies. However, even immense wealth has its limits, and even the extravagant Toshishun gradually began to become poor within a year or two. Then people are fickle. Friends who had visited daily until yesterday would now pass by his gate without even a greeting. Moreover, by the spring of the 3rd year, when Toshishun was once again penniless as before, there was not a single house in the vast city of Luoyang that would offer him lodging. No, not only lodging, but now there was no one who would even offer him a cup of water. So, one evening, he went once again to the western gate of Luoyang and stood there, lost in thought, gazing vaguely at the sky. Then, just like before, the old man with one blind eye appeared from somewhere and asked, "What are you thinking about?" When Toshishun saw the old man's face, he looked down shyly and did not answer for a while. But the old man, as kindly as that day, repeated the same words. So Toshishun, just as before, timidly replied, "I have nowhere to sleep tonight, so I'm wondering what to do." "Is that so? That's a pity. Then I'll tell you a good thing. Stand in this evening sun now, and when your shadow falls on the ground, dig at the spot where your chest falls in the middle of the night. You'll surely find a cart full of gold buried there." No sooner had the old man said this than he vanished into the crowd, as if melting away. The very next day, Toshishun instantly became the wealthiest man in the world again, and at the same time, he resumed his unrestrained, luxurious life. The peonies blooming in the garden, the white peacocks sleeping among them, and the Indian magician who swallowed swords. Everything was just as it had been before. Therefore, the enormous amount of gold that had filled a cart was completely gone again within about 3 years. Chapter 3. Flight to Mount Emei. What are you thinking about? The old man with one blind eye came before Toshishun for the 3rd time and asked the same question. Of course, at that moment, Toshishun was also standing idly beneath the western gate of Luoyang, gazing vaguely at the light of the crescent moon, faintly breaking through the haze. "Me? I have nowhere to sleep tonight, so I'm wondering what to do. Is that so? That's a pity. Then I'll tell you a good thing. Stand in this evening sun now, and when your shadow falls on the ground, dig at the spot where your belly falls in the middle of the night. You'll surely find a cart full of—" As the old man was about to finish, Toshishun suddenly raised his hand and interrupted him. "No, I don't need money anymore." "You don't need money anymore? Ah, so it seems you've finally grown tired of luxury." The old man stared intently at Toshishun's face with a scrutinizing look. "No, I haven't grown tired of luxury. I've grown tired of human beings." Toshishun said this bluntly, with a displeased expression. That's interesting. Why have you grown tired of human beings again? Humans are all heartless. When I was wealthy, they flattered and fawned over me, but just look what happens when I become poor. They won't even show a kind face. When I think about that, even if I were to become wealthy again, I feel it would be meaningless. Upon hearing Toshishun's words, the old man suddenly began to chuckle. Is that so? No. You are a remarkably perceptive young man. So, from now on, do you intend to live peacefully, even if you are poor? Toshishun hesitated for a moment, but then, raising his resolute eyes, he looked at the old man's face, as if pleading, and said, "Even that is impossible for me now. Therefore, I wish to become your disciple and train in immortal arts. No, don't hide it. You must be a highly virtuous immortal. If not an immortal, you couldn't have made me the wealthiest man in the world overnight. Please become my master and teach me your wondrous immortal arts." The old man furrowed his brows and remained silent for a while, seemingly deep in thought, but then, smiling again, he said, "Indeed, I am an immortal named Tetokanshi, who lives on Mount Emei. When I first saw your face, you seemed quite perceptive, so I made you wealthy twice. But if you wish so strongly to become an immortal, I shall take you as my disciple." He readily granted the wish. Toshishun was overjoyed, truly overjoyed. Before the old man had even finished speaking, he prostrated himself on the ground, bowing repeatedly to Tetokanshi. "No, you needn't thank me so much. Whether you can become a splendid immortal or not depends entirely on you, even if you become my disciple. But, at any rate, first come with me to the depths of Mount Emei. Oh, fortunately, here lies a bamboo staff. Let us immediately mount it and cross the sky in a single leap." Tetokanshi picked up a green bamboo staff that was lying there, and while chanting an incantation, he and Toshishun straddled it as if mounting a horse. And wasn't it wondrous? The bamboo staff instantly soared into the sky like a dragon, powerfully ascending, and flew towards Mount Emei across the clear spring evening sky. Toshishun, terrified, cautiously looked down, but below, only green mountains were visible in the fading light, and the western gate of Luoyang, which must have long since vanished into the haze, was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Tetokanshi, with his white sideburns blowing in the wind, began to sing loudly. "In the morning I wander the North Sea. In the evening, Kanwu. The green serpent in my sleeve, my courage is bold. Thrice I entered Yuyang, yet no one recognized me. Singing aloud, I flew over Dongting Lake." Chapter 4. Trials of the Spirits. The green bamboo, carrying the two, soon descended upon Mount Emei. It was a wide, flat rock overlooking a deep valley, and it seemed to be at such a great height that the Big Dipper, hanging in mid-air, shone as large as a teacup. Since it was a mountain where human footsteps had long ceased, the surroundings were utterly silent, and the only sound that barely reached their ears was the mournful rustling of the twisted pine tree growing on the cliff behind them, as it swayed in the night wind. When the two arrived on this rock, Tetokenshi made Toshishun sit at the foot of the cliff and said, "I am now going to heaven to meet the Queen Mother of the West. You are to sit here and wait for my return. Most likely, after I am gone, various evil spirits will appear and try to deceive you. But no matter what happens, you must never utter a sound. If you speak even a single word, be prepared that you will never become an immortal. Understand? Even if heaven and earth split apart, you must remain silent." "It's all right. I will never utter a sound. Even if I lose my life, I will remain silent." "Is that so?" "Hearing that, I am relieved. Then I shall go." The old man bid farewell to Toshishun, then straddled the bamboo staff again and vanished straight into the sky above the sharply carved mountains. Even in the night, Toshishun, all alone, sat on the rock, quietly gazing at the stars. After about half an hour, as the chill of the deep mountain night began to penetrate his thin clothes, a voice suddenly echoed in the air, scolding him, "Who is there?" But Toshishun, as instructed by the immortal, remained silent. However, after a while, the same voice resonated again, threatening sternly, "If you do not answer, be prepared to lose your life instantly." Toshishun, of course, remained silent. Then, from who knows where, a tiger with gleaming eyes suddenly leaped onto the rock. It glared at Toshishun and let out a loud roar. Not only that, but at the same moment, the pine branches above his head violently rustled, and from the top of the cliff behind, a white serpent as large as a 4-bushel barrel descended, spitting a flame-like tongue, visibly approaching. Toshishun, however, sat calmly, without even twitching an eyebrow. The tiger and the serpent, perhaps eyeing the same prey and looking for an opening, remained in a standoff for a while. But then, without either one making the first move, they both leaped at Toshishun at once. Just as Toshishun thought his life would be instantly lost, either bitten by the tiger's fangs or swallowed by the serpent's tongue, the tiger and serpent vanished like mist with the night wind, leaving behind only the cliff's pine tree rustling its branches as before. Toshishun breathed a sigh of relief, eagerly awaiting what would happen next. Then a gust of wind arose, and as soon as ink-black clouds covered the entire area, a pale purple lightning bolt suddenly split the darkness in two, and a terrifying thunder began to roar. No, it wasn't just thunder. Along with it, a torrential rain suddenly poured down like a waterfall. Toshishun sat fearlessly amidst this celestial upheaval. The sound of the wind, the spray of the rain, and the incessant flashes of lightning. For a while, even Mount Emei seemed as if it would overturn. But then, just as a deafening thunderclap boomed, a fiery red pillar of fire fell towards Toshishun's head from the black clouds swirling in the sky. Toshishun instinctively covered his ears and prostrated himself on the flat rock, But when he immediately opened his eyes, the sky was clear as before, and the Big Dipper, as large as a teacup, still glittered above the towering mountains opposite. Considering this, the great storm just now, like the tiger and white serpent, must have been a mischievous trick of evil spirits taking advantage of Tito Kanchi's absence. Toshishun finally felt relieved, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and sat up straight on the rock again. However, before his sigh had even faded, a majestic divine general, 3 jo tall, clad in golden armor, appeared before him. The general held a trident, and suddenly pointing its tip at Toshishun's chest, he glared with angry eyes and scolded him, saying, "Hey, who are you? This Mount Emei has been my dwelling place since the creation of heaven and earth. To boldly set foot here alone, you must not be an ordinary human. Now, if you value your life, answer me quickly." But Toshishun, as instructed by the old man, remained silently tight-lipped. "Won't you answer?" "You won't. Very well. If you won't, then do as you please, but in return, my retainers will cut you to pieces." The divine general raised his trident high and beckoned to the sky above the mountains opposite. At that instant, the darkness suddenly split open, and to Toshishun's astonishment, countless divine soldiers filled the sky like clouds, all brandishing spears and swords, ready to charge down upon him at any moment. Seeing this sight, Toshishun almost cried out, "Ah!" but immediately remembered Tedekanchi's words and desperately remained silent. When the divine general saw that he was not afraid, he became furiously angry. "You stubborn fool! If you absolutely refuse to answer, I will take your life as promised." No sooner had the divine general roared this than he flashed his trident and thrust it, killing Toshishun instantly. Then, laughing loudly enough to make Mount Emei tremble, he vanished without a trace. Of course, by this time, the countless divine soldiers had also vanished like a dream, along with the sound of the night wind blowing through. The Big Dipper once again began to coldly illuminate the flat rock. The cliff's pine tree, unchanged from before, rustled its branches mournfully. But Toshishun had long since ceased breathing, lying there on his back. Chapter 5. A Mother's Love and the Cry. Toshishun's body lay on its back on the rock, but Toshishun's soul quietly left his body and descended to the depths of hell. Between this world and hell, there is a path called the Dark Abyss, where an icy cold wind ceaselessly howls through the perpetually dark sky. Toshishun, blown by this wind, drifted through the sky like a leaf for a while, but then arrived before a magnificent palace with a plaque that read, "Shinra-den." As soon as the many demons in front of the palace saw Toshishun, they immediately surrounded him and dragged him before the steps. On the steps sat a king, wearing a black robe and a golden crown, glaring sternly around him. This was undoubtedly King Enma, of whom he had heard rumors. Toshishun, wondering what would happen, knelt there cautiously. "Hey, for what purpose were you sitting on Mount Emei?" King Enma's voice boomed from the steps like thunder. Toshishun was about to answer immediately, but then he suddenly remembered Teto Kanchi's admonition, never utter a sound. So he merely bowed his head and remained silent, like a mute. Then King Enma raised the iron scepter he held, and with all the whiskers on his face bristling, he cursed him haughtily. "Where do you think this is? It's good if you answer quickly, otherwise, without delay, I will subject you to the torments of hell." But Toshishun, as before, did not move his lips. Seeing this, King Enma immediately turned to the demons and roughly ordered something. The demons, awestruck, instantly seized Toshishun and soared into the sky above the Shinra Den. As everyone knows, in hell, besides mountains of swords and lakes of blood, there are also valleys of flames, called the hell of burning heat, and seas of ice, called the hell of extreme cold, all arrayed beneath a pitch-black sky. The demons alternately threw Toshishun into these hells. Thus, Toshishun was cruelly pierced through the chest by swords, had his face burned by flames, his tongue pulled out, his skin flayed, pounded by iron pestles, boiled in oil pots, had his brains sucked out by venomous snakes, his eyes eaten by eagles. The torments he suffered were endless, every conceivable torture. Yet Toshishun patiently gritted his teeth and did not utter a single word. Even the demons, as expected, must have been utterly astonished by this. Once again, they flew through the night-like sky and returned to the front of the Shinra Den. As before, they dragged Toshishun before the steps and reported to King Enma on the palace, saying in unison, "This sinner absolutely shows no sign of speaking." King Enma furrowed his brows and pondered for a while, but then, seemingly having an idea, he ordered one demon. This man's parents must have fallen into the realm of beasts, so bring them here at once. The demon instantly soared into the sky of hell on the wind, and then, like a shooting star, it descended swiftly before the Shinra Den, driving two beasts. When Toshishun saw these beasts, he was more than surprised. This was because both of them were shabby, emaciated horses, but their faces were those of his deceased parents, whom he could never forget, even in his dreams. "Hey, for what purpose were you sitting on Mount Emei? If you don't confess directly, this time I will make your parents suffer terribly." Even threatened like this, Toshishun still did not answer. "You unfilial wretch! Do you think it's fine if your parents suffer, as long as it suits you?" King Enma roared with a terrifying voice, as if the Shinra Den itself would collapse. "Strike them! Demons! Smash those two beasts, flesh and bone!" The demons all responded yes in unison, and taking up iron whips, they stood up and mercilessly beat the two horses from all directions. The whips cut through the wind with a whistling sound, raining down indiscriminately on the horses' bodies. The horses, his parents who had become beasts, writhed in agony, their eyes filled with tears of blood, neighing in a way that was unbearable to witness. How about it? Still won't confess? King Enma made the demons stop whipping for a moment and urged Toshishun for an answer again. By that time, the two horses, their flesh torn and bones shattered, were already lying collapsed before the steps, barely breathing. Toshishun desperately closed his eyes tightly, remembering Tetokanshi's words. Then, at that moment, a faint voice, almost inaudible, reached his ears. "Don't worry, no matter what happens to us, if only you can be happy. There is nothing better than that. No matter what the great king says, remain silent about what you don't want to say." It was unmistakably the familiar voice of his mother. Toshishun involuntarily opened his eyes, and he saw one of the horses lying weakly on the ground, gazing sadly at his face. Even amidst such suffering, his mother was thinking of her son's feelings, not even showing a hint of resentment for being whipped by the demons. Compared to the people of the world who flattered him when he was wealthy and wouldn't speak to him when he was poor, what a precious spirit! What a resolute determination! Toshishun forgot the old man's admonition, rushed to their side as if stumbling, and embracing the neck of the half-dead horse with both hands, tears streaming down, he cried out, "Mother!" Chapter 6. To the Foothills of Blossoming Peaches. When he came to, Toshishun was once again standing vaguely beneath the western gate of Loyang, bathed in the evening sun. The hazy sky, the white crescent moon, the ceaseless flow of people and carriages, everything was just as it had been before he went to Mount Emei. How is it, even if you became my disciple, you probably couldn't become an immortal? The old man with one blind eye said with a faint smile, I couldn't, but I feel rather happy that I couldn't. Toshishun, still with tears in his eyes, involuntarily grasped the old man's hand. If I had become an immortal, I couldn't have remained silent, seeing my parents being whipped before the Shinra-den in hell. If you had remained silent, Tetokanshi's face suddenly became stern, and he stared intently at Toshishun. If you had remained silent, I would have instantly taken your life. You no longer have the desire to become an immortal, do you? You must also be tired of becoming wealthy. Then, what do you think you should become from now on? Whatever I become, I want to live a human-like, honest life. Toshishun's voice was filled with a newfound clarity. Don't forget those words. Then, from today onwards, I will never meet you again. Tetokanshi began to smile, seemingly very pleased, but then suddenly stopped with a serious expression, turned back to Toshishun, and added, seemingly delighted, Oh, fortunately, I just remembered, I have a house at the southern foot of Mount Tai. I'll give you that house and its fields, so go and live there at once. Around this time, peach blossoms should be blooming all over the area.